27 foreign policy experts are asking the Biden administration to implement a limited no-fly zone over Ukraine. The open letter calls for blocking off some airspace to help civilians, starting with, quote, protection for humanitarian corridors. The group wrote that Ukraine is facing severe humanitarian disaster. This campaign for a limited no-fly zone is led by Robert McConnell, the co-founder of the U.S.-Ukraine Foundation. For more on this, I want to bring in someone who signed that letter, Ambassador Alexander Vershbow. He is the former NATO Deputy Secretary General. He also served as U.S. Ambassador to Russia from 2001 to 2005. Ambassador, welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us. You are the perfect person to talk to about this. Let's start by looking at the letter itself and what these foreign policy experts are calling for. They say that they want a deployment of American and NATO aircraft, not in search of confrontation with Russia, they write, but to avert and deter Russian bombardment that would result in massive loss of Ukrainian lives. So what exactly is a limited no-fly zone, and how would it be different from the regular no-fly zone that the U.S. has already rejected?
Mm-hmm. Well, Nancy, first of all, thanks for bringing me on. Our idea was a reflection of everybody's frustration and horror at the terrible killing of civilians as the Russians escalated their bombing in the first days of the war. And we were obviously moved, like everyone was moved, by President Zelensky's appeal for the West to do more, in particular to establish a no-fly zone to prevent the bombardment of Ukrainian civilians. At the same time, we recognized the negative views of the administration and of other allies to the idea of a no-fly zone and the concern that it could lead to escalation to an all-out conflict with Russia. So our proposal was an effort to kind of square the circle. It was a good faith effort to come up with a more limited form of no-fly zone in terms of its geographic scope, in terms of the rules of engagement, would focus on protecting the so-called humanitarian corridors, which the parties themselves agreed on, at least in principle, last week, but so far haven't made any difference in preventing the human suffering on the ground. So the idea was to limit the no-fly zone to those geographic areas where the humanitarian corridors were operating, not all of Ukrainian airspace. It would, without going into the details, the idea is that allies would actually tell the Russians that while we weren't seeking a direct confrontation, we would insist that they refrain from attacks on the humanitarian corridors while innocent civilians were making their way to safety. And we would tell the Russians that if they flew their aircraft, we would escort them out of the area. This wouldn't be an immediate trigger for the use of force, although that would have to be preserved as sort of the option of last resort. So there's some risk of escalation. It's not fundamentally different from a full-fledged no-fly zone, but the hope is that the humanitarian benefits would outweigh the risks, given the rising level of civilian casualties that we're seeing every day, to our horror, on our TV screens.
I understand the distinction you're making here. You want to protect these humanitarian evacuation zones. You're saying we wouldn't be protecting Ukrainian military installations. But do you believe the Russians would appreciate that distinction? I mean, they have already horrifyingly shown that they consider these civilian evacuation zones to be a legitimate target during wartime.
Well, we have to calculate the risks. You know, the Russians are clearly interested in avoiding a direct conflict with us, just as much as we want to avoid a direct conflict with them. So I think if we went to them, this would not be imposed without some discussion with the Russians. If we went to them and explained the ground rules here, that if they respect the corridors, don't fly the aircraft during those hours when the civilians, refugees are on the move, then this would not lead to direct confrontation. But at the same time, we're not going to just turn a blind eye to their continued deliberate targeting of civilians and their continued violence. So they would have to, I think, respect those rules. There's no guarantee that they would do that. But I think that, as I said, they have just as much an interest in avoiding direct confrontation as we do. And I think it could work. Now, the official reaction has been fairly negative to our letter. We're not totally surprised by that, but we were trying to at least provide some creative new ideas in a debate that seemed to be polarized between Ukrainians and their Western supporters.
Right. I think everyone is incredibly disturbed by the pictures that we're seeing, and trying to come up with creative ways to protect civilians who are simply trying to escape the fighting. You talk
Exactly.
about the fact that Russia doesn't want to engage in a war with the West, and clearly that is an educated guess that you are equipped to make. But what if that guess were wrong? And what if by imposing even a limited no-fly zone over Ukraine, we were courting what could be World War III?
Well, that is an inherent risk, and that's why I think the official reaction has been negative thus far. But again, I think that by engaging with the Russians, working with our allies on a common set of rules of engagement for this limited approach, presenting these to the Russians, I think we could at least pressure them into playing ball. But we would have to be prepared to manage any escalatory tit for tat if it were to occur. But I think those risks can be managed. I note that one of our signatories is the former Supreme NATO Commander, Phil Breedlove, who's an Air Force officer. And I think he gives us at least a sort of a sense that we're not off base in suggesting this idea.
You recently said something that I found really interesting. You said NATO is going to have to develop a culture of readiness and start talking Putin's language. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think we've learned to our chagrin in the current crisis that Putin speaks the language of force, of hard power. And I think we've deceived ourselves for many years now in believing that we could still become a partner with Russia and compartmentalize some of the areas of difference. I think we're now in what Putin sees, at least, as a kind of a all-out hybrid war between Putin and the West. And we need to ensure that we're prepared to hold up our end of this conflict. So this means serious efforts by NATO are going to be needed over the next couple of years to substantially build up our conventional and our nuclear forces. We're going to have to put a lot more forces along the most vulnerable eastern flank of the alliance, because we can no longer assume that Putin is going to be deterred just by the small number of forces we have in the Baltic states, in Poland, in Romania. We're going to need a much more substantial permanent presence to show Putin that any aggression would be met with a decisive Western response. So that's what I call speaking Putin's language, the language of force, of hard power.
Right. Certainly, the language of strength is something that he understands and sometimes respects. You were, as I mentioned, the ambassador to Russia for several years, so you have a lot of experience with Vladimir Putin's leadership style. What do you think the way out for him is at this point? I mean, he's never just going to give up and go home, even if he ends up in a stalemate with Ukrainian forces.
Well, I think the pressure is already building on Putin to find a way to disengage. The fact that the operation has gone relatively poorly with logistical and planning failures, the fact that the sanctions have had a much more devastating impact than I think he expected. He had priced that into his strategy, and I think he's been unpleasantly surprised that the Russian economy is really cratering and that Russian consumers are going to be beginning to express their dissatisfaction. So he'll, I think, at some point in the coming weeks, look for some kind of negotiated way out. And I think we and the Ukrainians need to be prepared for that, not to offer any one-sided concessions just to get Putin to the bargaining table. And certainly we, as defenders of Ukraine, need to be careful not to press them into making any compromises of principle regarding their future relations with the West, or regarding their sovereignty and their territorial integrity. But wars like this usually end with some kind of negotiated solution. So we better be thinking now about what our red lines are in any such negotiation and work with the Ukrainians on a common negotiating strategy.
Right, that's the open question, what he's going to ask for in exchange for his military's departure from the country. Ambassador Alexander Vershbow, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.